Alright everybody, so in today's video I thought we'd do something a little different. So I wanted to go over some of the lesser known Fast and Furious movie cars that I still think are pretty cool and worth a mention. Because obviously we have cars like Dom's Charger and Brian's many Skyline GTRs and all those types of things, which everybody knows about obviously because they're the iconic hero cars, but I think there's a lot of other cars in the franchise that definitely deserve a mention. So I'm going to go over one from each movie today. So the first car I wanted to go over is the Skyline GTR R33 in the first Fast and Furious movie. So this car, it was actually provided by somebody who owns a couple other GTRs. And what I thought was interesting in the first place was that he offered to use it in the movie because, as a lot of people know, there's the 25-year wait to import cars into the United States with laws and regulations and things like that. And this car came out in 1995, so in 2001, this car was only 6 years old. So how he got one over, we're not really sure. I mean, there's plenty of ways to get one. But what we know is he actually had a couple. And in May 31st, 2012, the state of Wisconsin actually confiscated the car and crushed it due to not having a valid VIN number. And that prevented the ownership of the car from an American owner. And the owner also had another R33 GTR that he tried to sell to another person. But the buyer ended up being an undercover agent, actually, which I thought was pretty interesting. And the owner of the GTR once again had to have the car crushed to avoid any charges for possession of the car. So yeah, like I said, it's not the most prominent car in the movie. It does belong to kind of one of the heroes in the crew. The name of the guy's escaping me, unfortunately, but he's in Dom's crew, and you see him around the sandwich shop and at the street races. And this is where we see the car in this kind of iconic scene where he tells the pizza delivery guy that he's going to have to find another way home because they're doing street races. And another fun fact is that in GTA 5, some of us might have seen that there's actually a special livery for the Skyline equivalent in game. And it's this livery, and it's called Not Tonight Pizza Boy, which is kind of a nod to this scene here where he denies the passage of the pizza delivery guy. So the next movie in the franchise was Too Fast, Too Furious. And, obviously there was the main cars like the Mitsubishi Eclipse and the Evo, and then Brian's Skyline R34 that everybody likes to talk about. But there wasn't too many, uniconic cars in this movie. I mean, they had the muscle getaway cars like the Challenger and the Camaro. But one car I wanted to look at here was when they do the scramble scene to lose the police in the final chase. And, all the racers come out of this big garage here. And, there's a couple PT Cruisers in this, which I thought was super ridiculous because it was kind of like, has tuner culture gone too far where somebody who's super into cars would really want to tune and make a build out of a PT Cruiser. As you can see there, it looks like the grill has kind of been extended down, and the car, I suspect, has been slammed, and, there's chrome all over it. And, personally, I think it looks pretty bad. I would never modify a PT Cruiser, personally. I mean, maybe if you put like a Neon SRT4 engine in it, maybe you could have something special there. But, personally, I would never do that. And I think it's weird that somebody who's super into car culture would do that. And, where they found this car too, I have no idea. But I thought it was a pretty interesting addition to the movie, and definitely one that I kind of noticed and kind of laughed at the first time I saw it. Now this next one from the Tokyo Drift movie is actually a pretty obscure one, and you really kind of need to be looking for it in order to see it because it's really not featured a lot. And that would be the Veilside Fortune Honda NSX. So this car is displayed in Han's garage, and when I first saw it, I thought it was pretty crazy. And I tried to look up some images of it, but I couldn't really find this bright yellow one Like they have one that's kind of a more pale yellow on their website. And personally, I don't think it looks nearly as good as this example that we see in Han's garage. But it's a really interesting look for the car. I think, especially the back too. The back looks really good. They restyled the front as well. They got some new wheels on it. And we know Veilside, of course, for doing Han's Mazda RX-7. But they do multiple different types of cars. You can go check out their website and actually see all the projects that they do. But I think they're a really unique design company. So I really enjoyed this car in the movie. And here's another shot of it here. This is kind of more of a livery like the RX-7 had. But yeah, I think the car looks, pretty insane. That big spoiler on the back, and I couldn't find many good shots of the back of the car. But if you look it up, it's like completely redesigned, and I think it looks really good. So yeah, that's the car from Fast 3 that I think deserves a little more recognition. So from the fourth Fast and Furious movie, I chose this truck here, the Chevy R3500 Crew Cab. And, the reason is because I think people don't talk about it enough and how crazy it actually is. It's like a six-wheeled truck, and it's got an OMP 572 Chevy crate engine in it with about 600 horsepower, which is crazy. And, the guy and the driver in the movie's ripping donuts in it and stuff. And so I think this was definitely one that deserved a little more attention than it got. Because it was only on screen in that first initial chase scene where they hijacked the tankers. But I think it's a pretty good looking truck. So I thought I'd include it in this video just because I haven't really seen anybody talking about it. So for Fast 5, the car I chose was this Porsche 996 GT3 RS. It's actually denoted the 996.2. But in the movie, this car is actually just a Carrera that's been rebadged, unfortunately. But if we're looking at the real 996 GT3 RS, it's got around 375 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 4.2 seconds. And it's actually a really track-focused car, as all 911 GT3s are. And so it goes around the Nürburgring in about 7 minutes 50 seconds, which is pretty good for the time this car came out in around the early 2000s. So there's a couple reasons I chose this car. The first one is just we don't really see many examples in the blue. I mean, obviously this is not an actual GT3 RS, but there is a couple out there that actually come in this blue color, which I think looks really good. Usually the car comes in that white with the red badging, but here it's blue with the black badging. I think that's a really unique look. The other reason I chose it is because obviously it's not included in that much screen time. Dom wins it from the guy in the race, and they use it to try and evade the cameras when they're planning the heist on the bank. But I think what this car does is really speak to how good a driver Dom is, because he races this guy for pink slips when he goes to this car meet when they're looking for a car, and he takes his Charger, which is obviously insanely powerful, but for Dom to get that car around a race faster than a guy in a GT3 RS, I think that really speaks to how good a driver Dom actually is to beat a car like this with a muscle car. So the next car I chose for Fast and Furious 6 was Letty's Jensen Interceptor. And, the reason I chose this car is because, it's pretty prevalent in the movie. Like, it's not like the NSX from Tokyo Drift where you really have to be looking forward to see it. It's in multiple scenes. She does the race against Dom and his Daytona in it. But the reason I chose it is because I think the movie did such a good job giving Letty this car, because as we know, Fast and Furious 6 for the most part takes place in England. And, the Jensen Interceptor is a British car. But so this actual on-screen example has an LS3 V8 in it. So it doesn't have the original V8 that the car came with. And those MagnaFlow side pipes, only one of the examples actually had those that were working. And the reason they didn't want to include them on all of them was because Michelle Rodriguez would actually burn her leg on it. So they didn't want to, burn her a bunch of times, because they do get hot because they're side pipes. But so basically what they did was they took a a British car, like a quintessentially British car, and they transformed it into a muscle car to fit Lenny's character persona. So I think it's cool that they were able to do that. I mean, they could have given her like a Corvette or a Camaro or something like that and called it there. But I think they did put a little bit of effort into casting her in this car because it fits the environment and it fits Letty's character really well. So the car I chose for Furious 7, which is actually my favorite movie in the series, is Dom's Plymouth Roadrunner. So this car's been in more movies than just this one. It was in Tokyo Drift. It made that cameo at the very end where Dom raced Sean, and he brought a Roadrunner to that as well. And that one was that kind of matte silver paint job. But this one is this more orange color, and personally, I think this one looks just fantastic. I think this is a super clean example. And I think it's an underrated Dom car in general because we obviously all know Dom for the Charger, and he's had a couple other cars throughout the series, but I think this one is like an amazing example. So the car in the movie actually had a GM LS3. It didn't have the original 440 in it, unfortunately. It had a Magnaflow exhaust and around 500 horsepower. So in terms of Dom's cars, this is actually pretty quote underpowered because people know his Charger's putting out around like 950 horsepower. So this one I just chose because personally I think it looks the best. I'd have it over the gray one. I really like the orange look. And I was pretty sad when he crashed it into Jason Statham's car when they did that little standoff thing in the tunnel. So the last car I wanted to look at from Fate of the Furious was Dom's Plymouth GTX. So I'm pretty sure this is a 1971 car with some 1972 parts on it, it looks like. So I think personally this is just as good a companion to Dom as his 69 Charger. The Plymouth GTX is another one of those really iconic classic American muscle cars. And so it's got, apparently for the movie, it had a 383 Mopar engine. So that's a 6.27 liter engine, but as you can see on the hood, it says 440. So, I don't really know because I couldn't find any information on what engine this car actually has. And Fast and Furious do kind of have a habit of building cars for the movie that look ridiculous, but in reality, it's kind of like a kit car type thing. So there's that classic line in the movie where they're all pulling on Dom's car with their cables stuck in it. And, Jason Statham says the car has 5,000 horsepower, which is a little bit ridiculous. So I couldn't find any actual stats on the car from the movie. But what I could find was that there is this car in Forza Motorsport 7. So these aren't the actual figures, but if the car in Forza Motorsport 7 was truly based on this car, which it supposedly is because it's the Fast and Furious 8, expansion pack. We could safely say that this car has 2,000 horsepower and 1,615 pound-feet of torque, because those are the stats from the game, which is pretty crazy. Obviously it's not 5,000 horsepower because that'd be crazy, but still a super powerful car and a really good companion for Dom, in my opinion, and one of the cleanest cars from that movie. So thanks for watching the video, guys. Like I said, this was meant to be more of like a fun thing, and these are just a couple of cars that I decided to look at just because I don't think they got as much recognition as they deserve in the movies as some of the other hero cars or villain cars might have gotten. But let me know what you guys think in the comments section. Let me know if there's other cars that you liked from the movies that you think are worthy of a mention. And I'll see you guys in the next video.